6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mary Kay, can you take roll call, please?
Angie Schreiber,
Here.
Kristen Metnowitz,
Here.
Andy Meary,
Here.
Jake Leiderman,
Here.
Dr. Julie Sprague.
Here. Do we have anybody for public comment? Okay. So because Lori, is that correct? Is having some flight issues, we're going to move the agenda around a little bit and do the Donovan group first, hear from Lori, and then after that, we'll hear from Mike from WisCorps.
He's our teacher. but
Okay,
speak
yep,
about this.
yep, about WisCorps,
Yep.
okay, yeah. So is Lori available, or?
Yep, I'm gonna. Oh, someone has to let her in.
Does Dustin have to do
Let me try adding her this way. Dustin, Julie, I know it's a close contest.
Right.
Technically. Well, there
I'm
you
in.
are. Okay, see if that works.
Julie and I can pick on each other because we're both of all this tech savvy.
Well, I was wondering why you're just sitting there watching her suffer.
Yeah.
When you know how to fix it. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is she giving us a presentation, or is she just speaking with us?
Yeah, was just gonna talk, so I could call her too. You just wouldn't see her face. Try that. Hey, Dustin is not on until 6:45, so can I just put you on speakerphone? Because I don't know why. It is. Yeah, so we have 3 board members here, Mary Kay Jake, a news reporter, and a teacher, admin, and 2 guests. So you're on speaker.
I'm going to switch you to my headphones because I know that there will be an echo if I don't. So let me
Okay.
just do that. It takes a few seconds. Thanks for everybody's patience. And how's the sound? Does that sound better?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm sorry that I can't see your faces. I apologize, everybody, as I am working to get on a flight. So I am watching that just to make sure I don't miss my flight. But I'm happy to be with you tonight to just talk to you a little bit about the process that you're looking to use for a facilities planning task force. And so, first of all, I would just like to give you a brief introduction of who I am, because I would be your public-facing person for this work. My name is Dr. Lori Miller. Grateful to be here with you. And my background is I have 26 plus years in education, all in the state of Wisconsin, first as a teacher, then as a director of curriculum instruction, and my last 6 years I served as the superintendent of the school district of Baraboo. And in my time, what is relevant to the facility task force, as a superintendent in Baraboo, I was able to facilitate a facilities task force group with two different capital projects, one to renovate the Baraboo High School, and also the second one was to renovate Jack Young Middle School. Both were pretty significant projects, and very thrilled to have been a part of that process with the community. So my background now is that I am a partner with the Donovan Group. I am based in Florida, but I serve districts all over the country, including a handful in Wisconsin. And the Unified School District of Antigo has been the district that I've been supporting over the past year. So again, tonight, we're just going to talk about our process for a facilities task force planning to make sure that my process or vision is in alignment with what you all hope to see, and find where we need to come together so that we have a shared focus moving forward. And our process for our facilities task force typically starts with identifying the facility needs that we will ultimately have to come up with some proposed or recommend solutions to address. And so I wanted to just kind of facilitate a conversation with the board members that are here to ask you just a few questions. And so I'm hoping you'll respond. I have good wait time as a former educator. But I'm just, thanks for the laughter I hear in the room. My first question is do you all have, as a Buildings and Grounds Committee, a strong sense of where our needs fall the most? For example, is there a certain building in the district that you would prioritize that has the greater needs? Or as we enter this planning process, you're open to see where the process takes us? So let's start there.
I would say that we're open to where the process takes us. We kind of want to have everything open and all ideas and solutions on the table, so we don't want to put blinders on right away.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else? So with that, I see on your agenda you're talking about a 10-year facility plan. Is that a plan that has already been put in place, or is this a new plan?
I'll let Jake respond.
So Lori, that is our most immediate needs. Really, that's
Okay.
a snapshot of the big ticket items that honestly should be done already, but they're not. So
Got it.
part of what this document helps us with is accessing funds out of Fund 46. So it's something that I try to update with the board yearly, and it'll change a little bit based on what fires pop up.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, right? Like the operational budget or funds that you have on an annual basis just can't keep up with the growing needs. And so it warrants this tension point that you all are probably experiencing, that we need to focus on facilities. So that's a great plan to kind of help guide our conversations with both internal and external stakeholders as we go through this process. Another question I have is, are you currently involved with an architect group that has recently walked through your buildings, or do you anticipate that being part of our planning process?
So we've done a lot of work in the past with Bray Architects.
Okay.
They were involved in the last time that we went to referendum. They were the original architects from the high school in the early 90s, and they've kind of somehow stayed relevant with us really for the last 25 years.
That's fantastic.
So they have
That's
a lot of
fantastic.
back history of all of our buildings.
That is super helpful, and so I would propose and anticipate that we would bring them into this planning process right out of the gate, because they have that historical background and understanding of your facilities, and would be able to answer some questions that I anticipate will pop up as we go through the process with both internal and external stakeholders. And so one of the things that we like to do as part of the process and identify the needs and getting to a point where we're prioritizing those needs is having conversations with your staff. So thinking about your different buildings, but also talking to different subgroups or classifications of staff. So like your custodial maintenance staff, your food service staff, and having an open conversation about what they are experiencing on a day-to-day basis and what may be challenges with facilities that are impacting operations. It's important to gather those stories to help us prioritize, but also like if we end up looking at the potential of a referendum, having that background information and stories from those who are working within the facilities really is helpful in sharing those needs with your community. And then our process at the Donovan Group includes a community engagement step where we like to host at least one, if not two, what we would call community engagement sessions to give a brief like update or state of the district, if you will, of the facilities to those who are interested. It'd be an on-call for anyone to come and participate. Hear from the district leadership board, and maybe including those great architects to just talk about what those needs are. And then we have a set of structured questions that we would ask to gather some feedback and some input from those stakeholders to see what we can take from that to add into our work as we start to prioritize the needs. So what this would look like then is we gather this information and we pull together a task force. And I have some questions about that, but typically a task force is either board-led, so it's facilitated by a couple of board members in conjunction with myself, or it's a couple of community members that have a lot of capacity and also capital with everyone in the community, with the board kind of supporting them and lifting them up. I've seen it done both ways. I've also seen the task force be comprised of like people who are just generally interested, and we do like an all-call, anybody who wants to be a part of the task force. Or we've done targeted invites where we identify specific individuals that we think have to be at the table. And we've also done a combination of both where we're inviting certain individuals, but also doing an all-call. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm just curious from the Buildings and Grounds Committee what your vision is. Do you anticipate that members of the Buildings and Grounds Committee would lead the task force with support with our facilitation? Or do you see handing those reins over to some community members? And again, there's no right or wrong way. It's just what your preference is.
I would say that we would be looking for it to be board-led, but then also doing what you called an all-call, I think you referenced.
Okay.
But with strategic invites as well.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds really good. And then with that, one of the things that we will see, and again, not every board does this, but one of the things to be thinking about is when we have pulled together that list of individuals that will serve as on that task force, some boards will do a resolution as kind of like a formal charge to that work for the task force to go and study the needs through that identification process and prioritize them, and then come back with recommendations to the full board for action. Sometimes boards feel it's really important to do that formal resolution, to do that as a formal charge. I've had situations where boards don't do that piece at all. So that's just another thing to be thinking about, and that's not something that needs to be decided tonight, but I just wanted to put out there in the space for you to be thinking about. And I'm happy to, Julie, I can share an example of what a formal charge and a resolution looks like so that you can share that with the board members as well.
Okay.
From that point, then we pulled the task force together. Typically, the work can be done over what I would say 4 to 5 meetings. And those meetings will be facilitated by board members with support from me as your front-facing person. And also a lot of the planning and background will be done together so that board members who are leading feel really comfortable with who's speaking that night, what we're speaking about, and how we're guiding the task force through decision making. So those meetings are facilitated usually through the use of a slide deck. Sometimes we do tours of buildings together as a task force. We'll look at some of the data that's gathered through the needs identification process, including looking at that master facility study, and also just reviewing the feedback that we get from engagement sessions. From there, we'll do some prioritization. And we'll get to a point where I believe that the task force will feel comfortable to make a set of recommendations for the board. And we'll be very clear with the task force that that's what those are, that they are just recommendations. Ultimately, the board decides what kind of action they want to take from the task force and their set of recommendations. Through all of this, the Donovan Group's responsibility will support you with the needs identification, including helping to facilitate those staff and community engagement sessions. I plan to be on site to gather some what I call ugly photos. I like to get photos of those tension points in the buildings that aren't working, so I like to call them ugly photos that show the need. Also some video, so that in the event we're creating communications down the road to share that need, we'll be prepared. Be on site to facilitate and advise the task force, including those background planning meetings. We'll do all the communications for you, so that includes the invites, the all calls, the note taking from these meetings, and also a summary report for each meeting. We take care of creating the agendas with you. We develop the slide deck for your use for each of these sessions. And then ultimately we help draft that report that goes to the board that has the list of recommendations. And anything in the middle that pops up that you might say is a need and we haven't talked about here, I want you to know that we operate from this lens that we're as flexible and responsive to your needs as we can be, because this is your process. We're just here to help you have success with the process. So that's kind of what we do. Again, just as a high level, we work through a process where we identify the needs, we create a task force, we share those needs, and we really help the task force understand those needs so that they can prioritize them and ultimately draft a set of recommendations for the board to review and consider for action. And so one of the last questions I have, and then I'll stop talking and turn it over to you all to ask questions, is I'm wondering what your anticipated timeline is and how soon you'd like to launch with this process.
Jake, feel free to chime in here, and you guys as well. I guess we've had a couple different conversations regarding timeline. Some feel like it could be done in a few months' time, and some feel like we should take our time and have this, be maybe a 10 or 12-month process to make sure it's done right. So we're kind of all over the board right now with that.
That's okay. That's okay. One of the things that I can do to support you all is maybe draft we always operate from what we call roadmaps, where we map out month by month what are the different things that need to happen throughout the process. And I could take a first attempt at drafting a proposed roadmap that would show what I think is an ideal amount of time, but then that gives us a starting point as a district and a team here to decide if you want to hurry that process up or if you want to extend the process out. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay. What questions do you have for me? What am I not talking about that you have a wondering about?
So I guess I'm a little confused here about what we're trying to do. And are we trying to just look at the facilities of our school, or are we looking at this community thing where the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club are included? And if we are, why don't we have them sitting at the table tonight?
Julie, I don't know if you or Jake want to answer that first, and then I'm happy to answer.
I can sure try. The board knows that I'm in favor of that option, but there's also strong sentiment that we want the school district to have its needs prioritized. In other words, we should be very clear on what we as a district need prior to engaging in a larger community project with the Y or the Boys and Girls Club, or perhaps both. I feel confident that the task force will see the condition of our elementary schools specifically. And I know that both middle school and high school and central office are on this 10-year plan, but the most immediate need for educational purposes is in the elementary. So I'm an optimist, but I think it will be both. I think the task force will, in short order, see that our elementary schools need help. But I also think that renovation, because we're landlocked and other reasons, there's one that maybe could have some work done, but I believe they'll recognize sooner than later that with existing facilities even being renovated, we won't be able to meet current educational needs.
And I would just add to that we had a process that included the Boys and Girls Club on Alaska, just thinking of recent work that we've done. And that was a partnership, and we actually included them at one of our task force meetings, just so we got an understanding of what they were willing to partner on, and that helped inform recommendations then that went to the board.
And we do have members of the YMCA task force who have expressed desire to be on the district task force. So I know that already people have both interests in mind and are willing, to serve in both capacities, so.
And just to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, Julie, Andy, if you remember last month when we had the committee meeting, we talked about how I think we all agree, are in favor of the YMCA, but we want to make sure that we're going to be focused on meeting the school district's needs as a priority, because that's our priority as a school board. So what, if you remember, Danny talked about like the YMCA would have their task force, we would have our facilities task force, and then they would be working kind of separately, but then also coming together maybe a little bit later on, just to make sure that we don't lose focus.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like my background as a superintendent, also doing this work, as a superintendent, but also with other districts. I hope that you see that as an asset, that I would be there to help facilitate and keep that focus on the district's needs around instruction and support for students and staff as your top priority as you're working through that partnership. I think both needs can be met beautifully in marriage together, if you will, but that'll be something that I'll be really attentive to in helping to facilitate this process.
So you're going to facilitate both task force? You're going to facilitate the one for the Boys and Girls Club as well as the one
what
for
I
the
mean is
school?
that in terms of facilitating that, we'll welcome them through our process as a district, and I think that we'll be able to marriage the two different processes together.
I do know if and when that happens, that Brian Bailey, who's the CEO of the YMCA in Wausau, he is interested in helping to facilitate from the YMCA side and would be very willing to work with Lori or board members if it does come to that joint effort. He would step in.
Which is great. I think that's fantastic.
Okay,
Other
my only
questions?
concern is that we all work in our own little silos, and then the little silos don't
Right.
fit together.
My hope, I understand, Andy, and I worry about that too.
What was the question, Julie?
That if we work in our own silos, how do we kind of waste time, spin wheels, and then we aren't coming together as quickly or as efficiently as we should.
Right. That's something we'll have to tend to as we move forward.
But I look forward, and I'm sure you all do, to get the task force off the ground, because we have been talking about it for a while, and so I think that'll be helpful if you send the roadmap, Lori, and then, is that the plane itself?
Are you taking off?
Are you still there?
I am. I'm sorry. I'm entering the plane now. I so apologize, you guys.
No, this
Not
worked.
what I expected.
We thought thought you were in takeoff mode.
I know. It's a small, like, propeller plane that I'm on, so.
Well, we will let you go unless you guys have any additional questions. Otherwise, we'll wait for the roadmap and.
Yes, I'll get that out to you as soon as possible, and I'm just, again, grateful for your flexibility, and I owe it to this team. I'll make sure I make up for it.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right,
Lori.
thank you. Safe travels.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for your flexibility, everyone.
I guess I have one question and needing clarity because at the last board meeting, we talked about the Donovan's Group's contract. And then we also talked about that we were going to be looking at other organizations to lead the task force. So I'm wondering how we got to Lori, assuming she had this.
Mary Kay and I were seeking clarity too, so we reached out to Danny.
Okay?
And his understanding was because we couldn't determine a timeline to vet the others and an official process to choose one, and that motion was eventually taken off the table, leaving the vote for the Donovan Group. So it was his understanding that we would just meet with her, which we had planned on anyway, in case it passed, to see what she would have to say about the facilitation.
Is that what
But-
you remember?
We asked that too. So my understanding is the others are off the table because of the short timeline.
It sounds like a separate conversation happened. I took
Yeah.
this as she was presenting what she would do, and we can either take it or leave it. I mean, it's already
And
paid,
I-
bought and paid for, you know?
I bet we could.
Right,
you know,
that's
Right.
kind of how I
that's-
was
yeah.
taking it, yeah.
Right, I guess I was thinking back from, Andy, like, what,
But Kristen, are you saying we could take it or leave it, meaning,
If we
Let her facilitate or find a different facilitator. I mean,
yeah, like she was
this is
throwing her
how, I
hand in
thought
the.
that she was saying,
in the
if you
pocket.
choose me, this is how I'm going to do it. Does this sound like something you want or not? I thought it was more of like, I didn't know. I thought it was more of like a sales pitch than it was.
And
Yeah,
that could
if
be,
you-
but we both checked separately, actually, with Danny. And he did not indicate any steps reaching out to those other,
I thought there was a list.
Yeah, there was a list and we were all supposed to check into them.
Well, we didn't get the list. Did you get the list?
No,
Okay, we didn't get the
I thought it kind of got left up in the air, so
yeah.
I thought this
So
was
I'm
the same.
Because that motion
Confused.
was taken
Right.
off the table.
I guess I don't remember that, I'm sorry.
What was the motion
Dave-
taken off the table?
To table the Donovan Group discussion until after they could review other options. So then that was the motion, and then he,
Dave rescinded.
yeah.
Right,
rescinded his
okay.
motion.
I remember
So then
that,
it was just voted on the Donovan Group.
right, but we weren't voting that the Donovan, we were just voting to renew their contract. Remember I was asking, like, we're gonna pay all this money and what, are we getting the same services because they're not doing a strategic plan with us now, you know? But we didn't vote on them for leading the task force.
No,
Correct.
we
yeah.
did not. vote
Okay.
For
So
the-
that will
she
have to
sounded
come
like,
up.
yeah, she sounded like she was thinking that they had it. Wait, anybody else
no,
get that?
Danny's
Well,
understanding that that's how it would be too.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
should clarify.
Yeah.
I mean, she will certainly understand if not,
I'm
but
with you, she's presenting.
Right.
Right.
yeah. I got that, but then she kind of flipped into, well, we're going to, you know, we would do this, and I don't know, it was this, she sounded like she thought that they had the,
because initially I was asked to share
There-
the work that they had done with other Wisconsin districts. So I
Yep.
did.
yes.
I uploaded, now tonight you'll see a video too. I uploaded that, but then I was really, surprised that we were opening it up, which if that's what the board decides, that's fine. But then that was taken off because there were so many questions about the timeline of being able to vet all of those. Who runs the process?
What are the priorities?
Yeah.
Right,
What's the criteria?
Yeah.
And the reason that you may have picked up that she was speaking as though she had the contract, is because she is under contract with us for a year,
Right,
not to do any one specific thing. So
Okay.
she's contracted
Yeah.
and can provide this if she wants, or if
If you
we want,
decide.
yeah.
Theoretically, if we had somebody else do this strategic plan facilitation, Lori and her group would still do the publicity for it, correct?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. And just on a different note, I talked with Ben Niehaus about some lobbying things, and this came up, and he said that, you know, he'd be an excellent reference for the Donovan Group. He said they're going to be one of
Okay.
the best in the state. So,
okay,
and because we had talked about using WASB.
right, yeah, that was one of them, yeah.
And so when I saw him, when I was down at the day at the Capitol, he asked where we were, and I told him I didn't know where we were.
Thanks, same weird place we were last time I
Yeah.
saw you.
Can we make sure that that's on the agenda for next week? For next Monday, or 2 weeks, yeah, for the full board meeting?
What exactly do you want on it?
Clarification as
Yeah.
to if we're still supposed to be looking at other facilitators, or if we're going with Donovan Group, right? Is that,
I think an
Well,
email would.
I don't
best
think it needs to
be
be on
put
the
out
agenda,
to-
but if we
yeah.
all knew what was going on.
Yeah, email all of us with the list, if you want us to look at that still. And then at the board meeting, I think we should vote if we're gonna do the Donovan Group or not.
I think that would lead you to your answer exactly.
Right.
So either it would pass that they facilitate this, or it wouldn't pass.
Right.
And then,
But if, you know, if we have the list of other people, we could, you know,
Right, but
Make an
the
educated
hangup that I remember from the conversation is, so we have this list. And we call these people and say, hey, can you facilitate a task force? What's the criteria, what are our parameters that we're going to ask them to make sure that we have apples to apples? Who's gonna create that, who's going to lead that?
Okay.
And that was I guess, the main confusion point from my view.
okay.
And I thought
Maybe.
we said that administration would create that list.
Well, that
That's
was
what I
talked
thought,
about, but
Okay,
That's what
don't-
I understood.
okay,
Too,
yeah,
yeah.
no action was taken, I agree with you, it was talked about.
Yeah, so now it's about as clear as mud for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I'd have to say that, you know, if you want that list sent out, you should discuss that with the board president first,
Okay.
because apparently he didn't want it sent out.
Yeah,
And the comment was made, which I think led to his decision, that if board members or even admin independently search these websites, what does that really, how do you make
Right.
an informed decision on who to go with, much less pricing wouldn't be included, so.
right. Okay. I mean, I see it from both sides,
Well,
so,
they each have to make a presentation to the board.
yeah,
And I recall you saying that, yes.
yeah,
It's just hard for me to pay someone else to do something that we're already paying someone that they can do. I get it, but.
I agree with you, and I like that it still would be our process. So this is the first I heard board help facilitate, you know, and I think that goes back to our interests as a district, making sure that they are front and center.
And the only other thing I was going to reiterate to her is, I'm sure she's well aware of that, the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club are like go time, like their timeline is now, so I was just going to reiterate that to her.
right.
Just a comment for thought, you know, I look at this process and I guess my start point always has been providing the right environment for our kids to learn. And are our elementary schools able to do that anymore or not? Because I think that will be a first big step in where we're going. If we think we can make those environments work, that's one thing. If we don't, then that's another thing. And I think that's my opinion, looking at the environments we provide for them to learn in and go from there. I think that Lori can get us at least started down there. You know, if we reach a point in this process where we feel like it's going somewhere that we don't feel comfortable with Lori leading, you know, if we want to bring, you know, I like that she referenced bringing Bray in. Any of the other referendum discussions have typically been with architect involvement for obvious reasons. So I like that part, but I think just the initial discussion of our environment's okay, or can we make those buildings okay? I think that's really the first step to get us pointed in the right direction. And I think Lori can definitely get us started there. And if we choose to bring someone in later, I mean, that's always an option, but we can at least get started.
I think it's a great point. So let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is our board making our committee making a recommendation to the board to approve Donovan?
I would be okay with that recommendation.
So
I am too.
I think we need to find out kind of what, the clarification from Danny first. I mean, we'll be voting on whether to use the Donovan Group or not, but if they still want us, whatever parameters, they still want us to check out the other companies or whatever, I think, because we did talk about that, so I think we should clarify that first.
You're going to call him?
Yep.
Okay. Well, we'll plan to put it on the agenda as a vote
Yep.
at the end of the month, but you can let Mary Kay or me know.
Okay.
Or email, however you'd like to.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, next we'll discuss the item D, Wiscorp's agreement.
We'll have Mike Bordio join us. He's a long tenured teacher here and head of our school forest committee. He's been involved with the school forest probably longer than I've been alive, so, well, maybe not quite, sorry.
That's quite the
But-
introduction.
But, yeah.
he's only 18.
Yeah, Mike has done a lot of work on this. He's really been a driver of a lot that's been up there, so I thank him for all his work on that. And with that, I'll just let him kind of take over what this project looks like and why we chose to go the route we did.
They all have copies of this?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for putting me on your agenda tonight. So, as you all know, we're really utilizing our school forest a lot more since we have our new facility opened up last year. And our school forest committee is now kind of turning our focus to the building's done. We need to do some work on the property itself, so trail work in particular. So we've been talking about one particular need is that we have the old kind of picnic shelter, and then we have our new facility, and it's really a long walk to get from one to the other. And so we'd like to create a new trail that makes that a shorter walk to make it more efficient use of our time and space that we have up there. So we have been discussing that. We have a trail marked out and everything. It includes a little bit of a boardwalk over a wet area, a bog area. And we were thinking about how do we get this work completed. And we came in contact with somebody who knows this company in La Crosse called Wiscor. It's a Job Corps. So it's college students basically that this is what they do. In the summer months, they get trained on how to do trail work and similar things, and then during the summer, that's what they do all summer long. So they're really specialized in this type of work, as opposed to having somebody come in with a bulldozer and just run it. They pretty much do the work mostly by hand work type things. They call it laying the tread, which is like the final path. It's not concrete or gravel or anything, it's just that it's a good trail. And it includes erosion control and the right type of grading. They know requirements for ADA accessible, so we could take a wheelchair down it, that sort of thing. So the contract or the memorandum that you have in front of you is what we would like to go with. We're proposing that they spend 3 weeks here. They're scheduled to come actually in July if we sign this. They're going to spend 3 weeks, and that'll include creating the new trail that we need, and then also improving our trail from our new building to where this one kind of starts. We have trails there, but they are just kind of cow paths through the forest, and they would improve those to make them ADA accessible as well. So we'd have a complete trail from the new building to the old shelter as well. And then they are also building the boardwalk over the bog area. So, anything else?
No, it's just that we've, as a committee, have looked for people to do this type of work, and, it's such a kind of a hodgepodge of handwork to creating the boardwalk across the bog, understanding how that needs to be built, places that you may or may not need equipment at different times. Like Mike said, the ADA, it's just kind of a unique blend of what we're looking for, and obviously, there's not a lot of people that are signing up to do handwork to that extent. Contractors aren't going to want to make trails. Excavators aren't going to want to do handwork. They're very, very specialized in this and very mindful of the environmental effects that their presence has on it, and try to work as low impact as possible. So
their fees are very reasonable. It's $6,500 a week for a crew of 5, which I don't think we would be able to match that anywhere with any other type of work unless it's volunteer. They're also willing to let us volunteer with them or do some work ahead of time so they can do more work when they're here. So like we can do some clearing with our volunteers, and then they can do more of the specialized work and maybe even do more for us when they are here. We think it's a pretty good deal, and they've been really, really good to work with so far. So looking forward to that. The funding, if you were questioning that at all, we have money. We have some money left over from our building, which we were saving for things like this, as well as a few other things that are coming up. And then we've also applied for a Remington grant, which we just received a couple weeks ago, $7,500 more from them. And we had a community member pass away recently, and all of their memorial money is coming to us. So I think, I don't know what the total is on that yet, but there's a pretty good chunk of money that is going to get us. So we did a little fundraiser a while ago too. We had a waffle breakfast and open house at the forest, and that people donated at that as well. So it's really coming out of the school forest money that's available.
Okay.
Mike, you've had some volunteers come up there and work on the trails, some, yes? Or not, just?
Some. We had a cleanup day one day where we
Cleanup
just walked
day.
and he picked up sticks and, cut a few branches that were overhanging, that sort of stuff. And I've had other people tell me, do that again, let me know, or stuff like that. So, and then previously, like before, years ago, our DNR forester would occasionally go in if we needed something. He would take care of it.
And so they're not going to use any kind of excavator or bulldozer for taking out stumps, because as I recall, there would be some trees about this size that you'd want to take out.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they do that. It doesn't make it sound that way. I don't know. They can bring stuff in. It's not like we're telling them not to, but I think they do most of their work with handwork. So, I don't know that we're in an area where it's pretty young forest.
Pretty young, and not too rocky, as I recall.
No.
Yeah, they did some work on the Ice Age Trail with their crew, and those rocks are kind of a big.
That's the type of work that they do. Last summer they did a Ice Age thing up here somewhere, Ice Age Trail improvement and stuff. So that's kind of their thing. So.
Yeah, I think it's great if you could get some volunteers. The really nice thing I like about this is they got some crew leaders, and so it's always just better to have somebody and say, yep, this is the way we're doing it, as opposed to 10 guys saying, trying to vote on how we're doing it.
And we could maybe have done it ourselves, but we're like, we need some expertise, can't just go in and do it ourselves.
Yeah. And they got tools, tools are coming with it, yeah. So I think this is great.
I think this is a great idea too. I just have a couple of questions. So in this contract, it says the school district will provide on-site or nearby housing with access to portable water, all that kind of stuff. So where do you plan on putting these?
I have to clarify that with them a little bit yet, but they are willing to stay like at Jack Lake.
Okay,
Camping, they'll camp over.
okay,
We can offer them to stay in our shelter, but we don't have a shower there. So
Oh, okay.
is it okay for them to stay in our building if they want to be indoors and go down to Jack Lake and shower? Don't know. We have a meeting with them at the end of the month, and I have to clarify what they really want for housing.
okay,
But we have some options there.
okay. And then it says that the district will provide planning and logistical support for the project, right? So my question is, you mentioned that they would be getting the permits. Does that include the DNR, the county permits, the wetland permits if you're going through a bog?
That's something that we will have to facilitate with our local county.
Okay,
That's on my plate to help
okay,
understand the impact that's gonna be. Initial conversations is, if it's not an impact or disruption, we shouldn't need one, but I wanna have a better understanding of the exact means and methods that the people that are actually going to come and install it,
okay.
particularly with that bog, just to make sure that we're.
And have you contacted the DNR regarding that?
They have no jurisdiction over that.
They don't?
It's county, and even the county, they're not gonna pocket this at all. There's
Okay.
nothing- If it were along.
I'm not
the-
worried about the county, I'm worried about the state.
If it's along the lake shore, that'd be a whole nother ballgame. But it's going right through the woods and then a little land area.
Yeah, that's the part that concerns me is the,
And that's, if we start getting, say an excavation contractor in here to start doing some of the stuff, we'll probably hit a lot more hurdles like that. Where this group of people, this company, they specialize in this, they handle these situations all the time. They know how to work with that environment.
okay,
So, yeah, I will be on top of making sure that we don't do anything that is out of.
right. Because that can get expensive if
Correct,
we,
yeah.
yeah.
No, no.
Yep.
Good question, though.
Okay,
'Cause, yeah, that could turn into some problems.
yeah,
Potentially, but.
yeah, fines and, yeah,
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff.
we're not going down that
Yeah,
road.
yeah. So I think we're in agreement that this would move forward to the board for a vote. And you'll have talked to them about the, where they're gonna be staying before the next school board meeting, or?
When's the next school board meeting? 2 weeks. Actually,
Yeah,
I
2
think
weeks.
that's the day they're here. Which is the 26th or the 24th? 24th, is that Tuesday?
Monday.
Monday.
Oh,
Okay.
they're coming on Tuesday.
Oh,
I mean, yeah, they gave us
Okay.
like, last year when they did the IC trail, they stayed at Jack Lake. So
Okay.
they're already familiar with that.
Okay.
I was trying to offer them maybe something a little better, I don't know, but,
okay, all right.
is that something that you really need to know ahead of that?
No, it's something I was curious, and I thought maybe if somebody else asked, it would be nice if you had talked to them, if you could answer it, that's all.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I mean, I can get that information,
Okay.
that before they come again.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, moving on, we'll cover the 10-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, this is similar to what I've brought in the past. It is a very abbreviated, tip of the iceberg type, document. Big ticket items that, primarily, I truly believe should be done already. They're big ticket items that I don't really see how we can easily fit them into any type of a yearly budget. And, I mean, some of them are smaller. smaller ticket items, but typically the smaller ticket items are something that I think that we could start working on with the use of Fund 46. This is a requirement for Fund 46, but it's also important to keep us understanding where we're at facilities-wise, financially. I guess a couple of the ones that I kind of want to highlight is really when we look at, from a safety stance, we have a number of them with the asphalt and concrete conditions on pretty much all of our campuses to some extent. That's one that is not going away, continuously getting worse, and could really, really cause us some issues if we start having major trip hazards, things like that, insurance-wise, liabilities. The other one is when you start looking at anything associated with doors, door replacement, door hardware, things of that nature, that really comes into safety as far as, functioning doorknobs and locks, reasonable security of doors. If you look through some of our, particularly in the middle school, there's a number of doors that are up to date, but there's a lot of them that are old, that have wood, the wood venting slats. There's really no good way to secure those in an emergency situation.
Okay, so you're talking about classroom doors,
Yeah.
not entrance doors.
Well, that
'Cause I
entrance doors as well, but
Okay.
the line item on here with door replacement includes both, some
Okay.
interior and exteriors.
I thought that was part of the window replacement.
It is.
Okay,
I just don't have numbers. That's how I have these
Okay.
categorized right now.
okay,
As we, remember when we looked at the window replacement and they gave the budget the 2.1 to 2.3, that was without doors.
okay.
So, that's why I left the door separate, didn't put it in that number.
So the doors are gonna be included up to the limit of what we approved?
The doors are ad alternate, so when they submit their prices, we're going to see a number for windows and a number for doors if we do them at the same time. So if depending on how the bids come in, we can do both or elect to do only the windows or.
Okay.
And we're only replacing the ones that have not been updated somewhat recently, or we're looking at all of them?
Door-wise, there's been three that I've updated since I've been here, but those are at least 5 years old. And I did have them include those. If we want to elect to say, take those out, we can. The
Okay.
reason I included them is, when you look at a building, I do think that aesthetics do matter somewhat. And the finish that we're putting on the new doors, the hardware that we're putting on the new doors is not what we currently have. So
Okay.
we can elect to take those out if we want, but I did include them in the package.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Just as a review, the window project, part of that's ESSER.
Yes.
How much of that is ESSER, do you know offhand? Is it like 1 million?
I don't
It's
remember.
kind of a moving target, but it was, I believe, in that $1 million, give or take.
And then part of it's Fund 46?
Correct.
And what about that grant? Is any of it that grant that we had talked about?
No,
No.
The grant.
Yes, yeah, no.
the one Katie and you vetted.
Oh, correct, yes, sorry, no.
Because that doesn't work for this project?
It may, but we need
Right.
to get the bid numbers and then with the submission timeline with construction being in, trying to remember now. Construction being in the summer '24, we have to submit,
Sometime this way.
it's a time, I can't submit to that grant, the grant application. If I was awarded it now, the completion date per the grant is sooner than the project would be completed. So
Okay.
we will have to apply for that at a later date if everything still aligns and it qualifies, I mean. it
Yeah, and
could
it's open
change-
to
it could
yearly,
change it,
the
but
last
yeah,
couple
they do a
years, yeah.
yearly cycle.
So at this time, it's ESSER, Fund 46, and Fund 10.
Yes, I would say, yes.
Regarding the middle school LED lighting upgrade with the fixtures, I know you've upgraded quite a few of them. Is that included in this, or is this still 210,000 for the lights that have to be replaced yet?
I have not updated any LEDs at the middle school. I mean, maybe a one or two as one breaks or something, my guys
Oh, I
put in
thought
LEDs.
I thought when we toured it, you said that they were, and they were working on,
No, I have pricing, I had them, go through and I got pricing for it,
okay,
but I don't have
okay,
funds to prioritize that.
okay,
We did here, and I got budgetary numbers based off of this project, talking with contractors to come up with that.
okay. And then the two boiler controllers, when we went down and looked at the boiler room, I
Yep.
thought those were 50,000 each. Or was that just a rough estimate, or is the 70,000 just a?
No, so the numbers, give me a minute, and I will.
Those things are ancient.
Back when they made stuff to last.
Yeah.
These are boiler controllers, and the reason I have these on here is because efficiency-wise, just a
But we could-
second here.
I think you figured out that it would pay for itself in 4 years with the efficiency.
Yes, 15% more efficiency recommended on burners and controllers. Upgrade every 20 years, return on investment would be 4 years. So that's just an efficiency thing, that if we had the money, we'd be saving money after 4 years, much like the LED lights. But again, how do you prioritize those needs when the funding is where we're at?
And
So Tom Schofield's athletic budget is going to help the gymnasium floor refinishing here at the high school.
Yep,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's one that, similar to when we redid the track, there was some funds left in his account. But the nice thing with Fund 46 is we don't, it's not viewed the same as our budget. Once it's in there, we can expend it in a different year if we need to, without having the financial impact to our general fund.
Okay,
So items like this, we have to put on to get approved to satisfy the requirement from the state for Fund 46.
okay,
So that's one that if that was my, my budget account, I wouldn't prioritize refinishing a gym floor. But since it's Fund 46, we have to have it on here.
And
Okay.
next summer,
Next summer is the projected, as long as everything goes together good with Katie's budget and everything, that's where she feels it would.
and this is the last time that this floor, this particular floor that we have now can be refinished?
Nope, we're good. We're good on this one, for this one, and probably one more for sure.
Okay.
They don't know. They try to sand as little as possible. I think what you might be referencing is the old middle school floor,
Okay,
the 53 gym. That one we can't sand down anymore because the nail heads are showing.
there's only 53.
So,
okay.
So this is your 10-year budget, it's 7 million. Does this mean like we should be putting 800,000 a year into this? Or is this 10 years, but it really should have been done in the last 10 years?
this is a 10-year because that's kind of the, when you look at, like Fund 46, they reference a 10-year maintenance plan. That's what they want to see. When I look at 10 years, honestly, if I'm making a 10-year budget based on the funds that I know I'm going to have, it's not going to have a tenth of what's on here, because I just know I don't have the funding. I would say that everything that's on here should have been taken care of already.
Well, so when Katie comes in to the finance committee and says, oh, we're gonna have this $6 million deficit, or $3 million, depending on how much the state increases something this year, is this in it, or is it
My
absolutely
remodeling
not
budget
in it, or-
is $0.
Not in it. In talking to Katie about tonight, she just made some notes here, and she was saying, really, we can't, I mean, we can continue to do what Jake said and have this list and just not, you know, we don't have the money to do it, so it would have to, we'd have to budget differently and really, like you're saying, put a lot in there for capital projects, or in Katie's mind, go to referendum. Because how would we ever afford, like the asphalt alone, over $1 million, what did you say?
I'm at like 1.6, that's just for here.
1.6 just for the high school. Where are we going to get that if we don't?
Yeah, so my question is, if we were going to referendum, is Katie saying, oh, we're gonna be $3 million short? Would that be the first part of the referendum? And then you might say, oh, let's fix the asphalt and add another $1.5 million to it.
You'd have to add on, because I know that's
So
not
it
in
would-
her
it would
current
be added.
projection.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yeah. So I get your point. This, when you say 10 years, is it really, no, it's really not. But
Well, it should be 10 years, it should have started 10
it
years
should-
ago.
Right, right. You know, when you look at building a budget, you know, typically, you know, like we just re-roofed the middle school. You should be taking those items that are, you know, just replaced, rolling forward projected costs on lifespan and putting them at the bottom and building that up. And that's, you know, that's how you really do budget for a maintenance priority, whether it's 10 or 30. The sad reality is that we're so far unable to do that financially that it's really kind of a wait and see what starts on fire and then hope we can find enough money for it.
Which is stressful.
It's extremely stressful. You know, and when you look back, starting at
You should look at it as exciting, Jake, it'd be a lot better for your health.
So are you saying we could take roof replacement off the middle school list?
No, that's stuff that has to be done yet.
What did you just say, middle school roofing?
The ones we did 2 years ago. Or
Oh, so different
last year.
section.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, if we built those new elementary, we'd take all 3 of these elementaries off, correct?
Yes.
Essentially.
Yeah, you know, that is a good kind of example. When you look at the roof replacement that I have on here, those are current roofs on the middle school that are past their life expectancy right now. As with everything, you know, you look back at that CESA report, there's items that have lasted 3 times their life expectancy. And I'm not I would never recommend that we replace something just because industry says lifespan. You know, a good example is our operator for an elevator at the middle school. That's past its life expectancy. It has not caused us any problems, it operates just fine, and they want $40,000 to replace it. I'm not going to recommend to spend that. But when you start compounding everything you have past its life expectancy, eventually something's going to fail. And if you don't have that funding to handle that, that's when you start getting in trouble. So that $920,000 on the middle school roofing, right now, it's in good shape, not leaking. We surveil it, we maintain it, we do everything we can. We want to make it last as long as we can. But it could be next year, it could be the year after, it could be 10 years from now. It's when you get past that expected life, you're playing with borrowed time.
And I'm sorry, we're not using the same roofing company as we did on the elementaries?
That's a whole different.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if there is any pitched roofs or anything like that, we're not going to be using the same company, right?
They're probably not in business.
Well, who
I
did
would
the
say
pitch
they do
roofs?
it.
Does the school district do them?
They're in business. and-
With Joe
The truss
Schroeder?
roofs, yeah, they put trusses on top of a flat roof. Yeah, we're not ever doing that again.
Yeah, okay.
I couldn't help but notice that roof on, I don't know, there was 3 there.
What's that?
There's no roofs for the elementary schools even on there. They must be fine.
Well, they're newer, but they have a
Those-
2-inch hole all the way down the
Yeah,
side of them on
yeah.
both sides, every
That's-
single building.
That's part of the attic insulation ventilation price. It doesn't fix that 2-inch, but it modifies the soffit to vent properly. So then hopefully we can fix the 2-inch hole, the whole length of the roof.
Yeah, both sides.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not a great document. It's kind
Something
of
to
a
work off of.
frustrating situation to be in, but, you know, I guess the point is we need to figure out how we're going to start funding some of this, particularly ones that are related to safety and liability. And I don't see how that does not start a somewhat discussion of asking the community for money.
Well, we're taking a big chunk out this year.
Yep. Yeah.
Next year.
Yep.
At the middle school there, I mean.
Correct.
Not a quarter of this.
But again, this is the tip of the
Benefit
iceberg.
of ESSER
Yeah.
funds.
Yes, yeah. But specifically, when you look at the asphalt and concrete conditions, we're playing a dangerous game, because every year those pieces of concrete move more and more. And when they do, that's a trip hazard that we're liable for.
Yeah.
And that's just
Keeps
the
everybody
reality.
agile until they're not.
All right, moving on to the Facilities Task Force update.
We're moving this on for approval, right?
Oh, yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yes,
Just so Mary Kay can keep her.
yes, thank you, sorry. Do we have any more people that signed up for wanting to be on the task force?
I had one more, but I don't remember who it was. I have 4.
Okay, and where have we advertised that or put that out to the community for, looking for people, inviting people, I guess?
Just right through the board.
It's been in the paper several times.
Okay.
To write articles.
Have we done anything with social media or like the Antigo information page? Anything like that?
You don't have to do it on our page.
Okay,
We're just waiting for direction and,
Right.
okay,
but
okay. But I think it's important to get closer to the start date because like I had talked to people back in January or even before that and they were like, well, you never called me. Like, are you guys even doing that still? So I don't want to ask people too soon because then
And
you get
that's why
that.
We haven't done anything because we just don't know what direction
Right.
to give them.
Right,
And I would think once we hire a facilitator, they will,
we'll get rolling, yep.
yeah.
yeah, because I know
And we will look more at, do you want it to invite specific people, or do you want it open? I mean, that's a discussion to have with that facilitator.
right, well, I think we want it to be both. So,
Yeah.
yeah, because we want, especially if we're going to, if the possibility, not saying we're going in this direction, but even if the possibility is that we're going to be going in referendum to build any kind of new facility, we definitely want to have as many people involved in this so that they can go out to the community and help spread the word and buy-in of why it's important to do whatever direction we decide. So. So,
Which is why I think it's important that we recommend a facilitator so we can get going.
right. I think we were wanting to start in May, that's what I was thinking.
That was the original timeline, and I can tell you I've been very, very anxious about this.
Yeah.
Because that timeline is coming closer and closer, and I'm getting anxious on what I'm supposed to be.
Well, I know at our
Right.
last committee meeting, we talked about getting the floor plans for the.
Those are done.
Those are done, okay.
Yep, for the 3 elementaries. Those are all just the same format as brought west.
Okay.
east
So we
and
have
north are
the,
done.
we have the 3 elementaries, then we have the high schools, and we have the middle schools all ready to go?
I did not put the high school and the middle school in the same format as the elementaries.
Okay,
That's a pretty big building. I mean, we're talking 20,000 square feet to 200,000 square feet. I mean, that's a bigger document. And, you know, going back to our conversation when I brought West, you know, to put the resources into doing that same exact thing at the middle school and high school, do we want to do that now, or do we want to focus on the discussion of the elementaries and see where that takes us, and then do that work with the other two?
Well,
Because I think that could definitely change what we're looking at
right,
doing, you know, particularly in this building. I don't see needing every single wall. Like, for instance, you know, we may move some walls around in an academic area to fit, say, 7th grade, if that's an option. You know,
Right.
maybe we have to do, but then we look at that area, what options do we have to fit 7th grade, and how can we do that? Not looking at every wall down in tech ed and things of that, you know.
Right.
I don't see that that's going to be.
well, and like, for example, like, if you say, you know, if 7th grade goes to the high school, then we could potentially get rid of the tech ed part of the middle school,
Right.
because it would be
Could-
here.
Yeah, and that's
So-
where, you know, I thought that we were going to do floor plans like we did for the 3 elementaries, and
Mm-hmm.
then just look at capacity of students based on like square footage through Bray, how they did the original worksheets for
Right.
the other 2.
Right,
That was
Okay.
the direction you
Okay,
went.
Yeah.
all right,
yep,
so yeah, that's where we're going with that.
okay. So just a heads up that we're gonna need that at some point, though.
Yep, no one, Bray's working on those capacities, they probably have a lot of it already figured out.
Okay,
And I have the copies of the 3 elementaries, so those are in my possession.
okay,
So,
okay. All right, so, we'll just report with an update with, kind of where we're at, that we need to decide on the facilitator,
That's good.
so we can get going. So,
Add that to the agenda, is that what you're saying?
no, I'll just give an update,
Okay.
or you can put it in the notes for the consent agenda or whatever, what came out of that. All right, anybody else have anything else to add?
I guess I'd like to go back just to the 10-year plan and, you know, really, I guess, what is our plan to fund that? I mean, are we going to, at some point, look at an operating referendum? I mean, it's just, it causes me a lot of anxiety not to know from the safety stand side, you know, to redo the concrete and asphalt is really, that thing is ticking, and it's getting, I mean, you go to North Elementary 2 weeks ago, and one of the slabs was up 3-4 inches. We actually caution taped it off, because it just was not safe to walk on. You look at the front here, I mean, there's trip hazards everywhere. I mean, we have to start addressing this, and I know that is a big ticket, and I know that that's a tough thing to do. I guess I'm just looking at what your thoughts are. I mean, should we be looking at trying to get a company in to get us some budgetary numbers more accurate than what I have right now in preparation to look at what that would look like in a referendum? Or are we going to wait until the task force figures out what we're doing, or, you know, I don't know, I guess we can, like, some thoughts, I guess, not that we have to make a decision, but.
So my thought on that would be, the first thing you'd want to know is, what's the state doing? How much funding are we going to get from the state? Is special ed funding going up because we're taking money to do special ed? Is the low revenue ceiling going up, and how far is it going up? And is the revenue limit itself going up? Because if the revenue limit went up $1,000 and the low revenue ceiling went up another $1,500 to make all schools more equal, that would be $2,500, and that would be huge in our district. And special ed would be huge. But to that end, the first step would be for our board to decide, do we want any of that? Do we want the revenue limit to go up? Or would we prefer to go to the voters and ask for money in a referendum? And so last fall, Danny signed on to the letter asking for the revenue limit to go up. And since then, we really haven't we haven't discussed it, we haven't taken a stand.
So are
You know,
you,
I listened to a WASB webinar on Friday, and they said, well, have all your lobbying done by May 1st. So, you know, we'll meet on the 24th, and we can decide something.
And it is on the agenda at your request to
Yeah.
generate a letter.
yeah, I was gonna say, is, we're looking at generating a letter and all of us signing it or something, or?
Well, you know, Anago has a unique story to tell here as far as the revenue limit goes. And we can just generate a letter and say, we want special ed to go to 60% and the revenue limit to go raised by $200. Or we could try and tell our story.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what we ought to be deciding to do. If we're just doing that generic thing, okay, we're in. And it really doesn't have that much impact, in my opinion.
So you're saying that we all should go down to Madison and lobby? Is that what you're saying?
You already missed the day at the Capitol.
Right.
That's already gone by.
Mm-hmm.
There's joint finance hearings.
Mhm.
There's 2 this week and 1 on the 26th.
26.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's listening sessions that you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, really, we ought to decide, because I know that if I talked to Mary Falkowski, she would say, oh, you ought to pass a referendum. That's up to local control. And so
Yep.
where are you two on this issue? But where's our board on this issue? Do we think this should be a local control thing, or do we think it should be a state thing? And that's really where that decision would have to be. And, you know, you got to make that decision before you generate the letter.
Mm-hmm.
We just had 3 people run on keeping the taxes low.
Taxes flat, yeah.
And so for me to generate a letter and say, we should raise the revenue limit, well, that doesn't jive with those 3. And if we want to speak as a board, we should speak as a board. We shouldn't have one person speak.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, to get back to you, you know, yeah, you could get bids and say, well, if it doesn't come from the state, we're going to get it from a referendum. But I think it's a little early to do that. I think we really got to go through the strategic planning. If the state doesn't come through with something, you got to go through the strategic planning and decide what we want in a referendum
Mm-hmm.
or referendums.
Well, and it's gonna, a lot of it's gonna depend on what the outcome of the task force is as well.
Well,
So if,
but one argument I'd push back on is this high school's not going anywhere.
well, right, I'm saying, like, if the elementaries were,
Right, but the 1-6 is, I mean, I could find ways to, fix a approach at North. I did East last year, I made that work.
mm-hmm,
So, I mean, there's little bites that I can take, and I do when I get the opportunity, but, I'll never be able to fund this, just the asphalt and concrete
Right.
here, that worries me.
I will say that, in regards to the boiler controls, I would assume that the high school would qualify, but I know for sure that the middle school would qualify, and there's some grants that are out there to help schools get more energy efficient. So that would be a great use for that.
Yeah, because like we talked on that walkthrough, when we look at, do we replace the boiler controls or do we put new boilers in? That gap is closing because the boiler controls are becoming those boilers are becoming older technology that's really not made anymore, so any
Right.
parts to support that, just as time goes, naturally get more expensive because of supply and demand.
Which is
Likewise,
unfortunate, yeah.
But likewise, the new boilers that would replace the whole boiler are becoming more popular and less expensive because of supply and demand. So as time goes on, it's it's going to likely be more
Cost effective.
cost effective in the long run to just replace the boilers.
I
than
see
the
your point, yeah.
controllers. But, at the time that I first got these numbers, that gap was quite large. And with the return on investment on 4 years,
Yeah, that sounds like
so
something
you
that
gotta
we should
balance that, but
seriously look at.
if I were to look at writing a grant to replace, I would probably lean more towards the new boilers, and my gut says that the grant would probably want new boilers versus new parts out of old
Right.
technology.
The only problem with that is that the newer boilers only last for about 10 years. 15 if you're really, really lucky. And the one at the middle school is from the 1960s.
Yeah, those have been rebuilt.
Right.
to-
But the boilers
Controllers
today
have
are
been
not going to
replaced.
stand up like those
Yeah.
did. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Our next Building and Grounds Committee meeting will be Monday, May 8th. And with that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Let's call this meeting to order. We'll stand for the pledge. Gonna take roll call, please.
Kristen Mackmiller,
Here.
Angie Schreiber,
Here.
Trina Borneman, Heidi Siebert,
Here.
Dr. Julie Sprague.
Here. Great. I don't believe we have any public comment.
No.
Okay. We will start with our quarter 3 behavior update, please. Go ahead, Clint. He's amped. He's ready.
Here's the same report that we gave last time, and
Thank you.
just lined it up so you can see quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3. The two highlighted things in quarter 3, one, we had non-attendance, only 150 students compared to 197 and 196 in the other 2 quarters. Those non-attendance behavior referrals, because the high school operates a little differently, and again, we give a behavior referral for every 3 tardies. A student would earn a lunch detention on that. That goes as a behavior referral. So that's why we included attendance and non-attendance. We broke those out from the totality of behavior referrals that we had. So I wanted to point out that 150 students were responsible for non-attendance behavior referrals, which is the lowest we've had yet this year. And also in quarter 2, I know that a lot of the other schools had shared students receiving 0 or 1 negative referrals, and I wanted to put that data point on there as well, because I said I would do that at the end of quarter 2. And that's 94.5%, which is a good number. Could be better. We've got a lot of room to grow. But that 94.5%, that is significant. The rest of the data is the same as you've seen in quarter 2 and quarter 1. So questions on this sheet?
I noticed on the bottom it says you're solidifying thresholds for students with high referral numbers to be addressed by the behavior strategist. Where are you at with that? Like, can you tell me a little bit more?
Anita, do you want to speak a little bit
Sure.
to that?
So we have some representatives from each grade level, or elementary, middle, high school, 4K through 12, where we're really trying to align our practices. So we've been meeting with the middle school, and the middle school has been meeting with Jolene Keppel, who's our elementary rep, and we're working through different tiered interventions that match student needs, that might be matched through a threshold. So if a student is referred 5 times in a month period, they'll be meeting with Mr. Sigmund so many times a week, and we'll work through that intervention for many weeks, see if it's working well. If not, we'll try something else. The middle school is at 3 per month, and we chose 5. Yeah, so we're just really trying to align and make sure it meets the needs of all students.
Okay, thank you.
And then Mr. Marak is going to explain one type of plan that we have at the high school.
So we've been using what's called a step plan more lately, and the step plan is basically an alternative plan in lieu of removing a student from school, sending them to a different program, and it's really an accountability piece that holds the student accountable to look at their own actions, what they're doing in school, and we check in weekly with this student. This student, you can see they started off really, in her terms, from last year, great, and then started to slide. And so then we put her on this step plan. Basically, she worked her way up weekly to gain hours back in the school day. So she started off with a half day. If she was succeeding, no behavior referrals, less than 2 tardies and no excused absences, she can add another hour to her day. So it only took her 4 weeks, which is the minimum, to get back to a full day at school. And we checked in weekly. Myself and Mr. Hildebrand checked in with this student just so that we could make sure we weren't missing her. And her tardies went down from 3 tardies in 4 weeks and only 1 unexcused absence from basically 75 unexcused absences and over 100 and some tardies in the school year. So it's really that accountability piece and that student really setting a goal and then just working together as a team. And it's really been beneficial for other students as well. So it's not easy to read, but if you want to take a look, it's just her plan basically started here. And
There's no name on it.
nope, there's no name. And then she worked her back way to a full day. And you can see this is her previous attendance throughout the school year, which again, wasn't so. And she worked her way back into a full day weekly by setting goals, and attendance related was the biggest one.
So how's that work with her classes then, if she's missing like a month?
Yep, the teachers have been super flexible. We have Canvas, some of that learning, a lot of it's online. So they're taking on ownership to meet with those teachers when they're in school for 4 days, 4 hours, or 5 hours, or 6 hours, or whatever step they're on. And then they're communicating. The teachers have been amazing with being flexible and working through with those teachers. After school meetings, during pride time, it's really dependent on the student and the teachers that they have.
Okay.
Grades have gone up, attendance has gone up, behaviors have gone down, which has been awesome.
Yeah. Good job, everyone.
So again, it's lengthy there, but you can take a look if you'd like to. Any questions? Okay.
All right. Anybody have anything from the school? Okay, middle school.
I'm gonna pass out a sheet this time. We changed ours up just a little bit from how we had been doing it in the past.
So we have, me and the high school team reference that we've been meeting, we met twice, now we're meeting one more time in May and work with Len Walters and Susan Nine and cleaning up systems. So we do use like a 3 strikes and you're out kind of policy with most of our things at the middle school. So when we get 3 referrals, doesn't matter if it's major or minor, that student comes up to our care team meeting. Our care team meetings are now every other week. The care team meetings include administrators, school counselors. Lynn Walters joins. Scott Sigmund is mainly at the high school, but he is at the middle school on Tuesday, so we do invite him for that meeting, and then he can also maybe give us some other input. Currently, he's really focusing on 7th grade, trying to build those connections, getting ready for those transitions to 8th grade, so that is just one more asset, so we're happy for that. And then along with that, besides, we just kind of put it as a year-to-date, term 1, 2, 3. We see a lot of the same referrals. It's, disruptive. You look at the big 5 behaviors going down, disrespect, disruptive. Those continue to be a concern in all areas. Those are our biggest concerns because obviously it is happening and it's mainly being reported in the classroom that affects student learning. So that is still a concern of not only us here at this meeting, but our teachers and families and students as well. And I don't think any of us have a magic wand to figure that one out. Just know that we're to the point right now where a student does need to have a different access point to get their learning for a specific hour or class. If we've tried A, B, C, D, F, G, and it's still not working, we do have a few students in 6th and 7th grade that are accessing from, let's say, Mrs. Kazarik's room or Mrs. Reichel's room, which is a behavior support room, where they can still get a Google Meet into the classroom for one of their content classes. And so that's where we're at with a few of our students. But we also need to be mindful of who the student is, the family understands, they agree, and that we all work together. And I'm sure that's very similar in all of our schools. So we take that very seriously. Just know that our teachers, they put up with a lot. And I don't have the magic answer for that. We're trying to figure that out through restorative, also just connecting with the families. Teal has done a great job this year, really sitting down and meeting with students, whatever it takes. I mean, I think that's where we're all at. And with that said, I will go ahead and let Teal share out some more.
The reason that we had switched it up, we wanted to utilize EduClimber a little bit more than what we have been doing in the past. And so that's where we kind of pull all of this data from. It is a little bit inflated, especially with the negative referrals just overall. What we had found in the program is it will pull a referral number for a student even if they were labeled as like a victim, so to say, in the settings. So when we kind of did a deeper dive into it, whether they are an offender or a victim, it was pulling them as a referral. So if you cross-reference that a little bit, it seemed to be about 15 students total for each of those grade levels that were included in a victim, but it got included in there as well. And we're just trying to work through that. I mean, I was looking for the options.
Is that included in here too, like the big 5? Is the, like, let's say disrespect 154, does that include the victim?
EduClimber is not 100%.
I'm just asking if that includes that. Okay.
There is some, and I think everybody can attest to that. What we did this term was we took Infinite Campus. When we saw that, okay, we looked at our enrollment, and I'm like, well, we got, like, it's showing that we have 450 kids in, like, whatever, a certain class, but I'm like, I know that our enrollment doesn't match that.
Right.
So there is some discrepancy, so we did run some, you can still run reports from Infinite Campus, which any one of us can do. I think what we need to get to, and the point of using EduClimber this year was to really, like, what are some of what is going well and what do we need to work on? Because to be honest with you, we should be able to just run a report, and we can all run the same report, and we should be able to get the same information if we're all putting it in correctly, which we know that we've been continuing to talk with our staff about putting in the correct time. Okay, yeah, you might not put your referral in until 10 o'clock tonight, which many teachers put in later at night because you can't do it at the spot. Please go in and change the time, because that does affect, like, because we know that, like, Fridays aren't.
21 referrals happen at midnight.
Yeah.
Well, that obviously didn't happen, so.
Right.
Who has the
So-
key to the school?
There's discrepancy in all areas, but that's just something that we just wanted to note. And we are working with that, and maybe we're doing something wrong on our end, but that's another reason why talking about this is important, because maybe we're not doing something right or something like that.
So just to clarify, term 1, term 2 were IC pulled, and then term 3 was EduClimber?
No, I went back and did EduClimber for all to see, to have an even continuum to
Okay.
the whole thing.
So even though
Otherwise
they're
it seems-
included,
Yep.
they're included across?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, they're included across. So one
Okay.
big reason, like in the physical aggression,
Yeah.
that's one where there's oftentimes a victim that is involved with that. You know, they got pushed,
Yeah.
they got hit, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
And so they were showing up in there even though they didn't engage in any sort of physical altercation or fight, but they were a victim of it. I found that they were actually shown in that report as well.
So that
Um,
53,
yeah.
let's say, does include victim?
Yeah, so
Okay.
some of those are a little bit inflated for how it looks, but overall, what we wanted to start doing is kind of looking at the patterns,
Yeah.
looking at those big 5 behaviors, thinking ahead to next year, what kind of interventions, if we know that these are the top 5 things that are gonna happen within the school, what interventions do we have in place, what new ones do we wanna
Yeah.
bring in, and what can we stick with for next year to hopefully combat some of those 5 that are occurring. And then we also, one more important thing, if you flip it over to the back, we really dove into with kind of our PBS team and looking at the data, those top resolutions. So what are we currently doing? How many times are we doing those? That type of thing. So in that order would be the order of our top resolutions that are used at the middle school. So that was another piece, not just recognizing those big 5, but what's taking place in lieu of those big 5 and what do we want to change to improve for next year.
One category we added was on the bottom of the front page is tier 2, so that would be intervention. So again, that's another piece that we've been meeting with. We use what's called check in, check out a lot, which is we have 2 different types. One is a universal, so if I flag up as 3 referrals, the care team sees that, we take a look at it, we diagnose the behavior incidents that were for me, and then we determine, well, do you think that we should maybe have a check in, check out? Maybe this student needs somebody to help have a discussion with around the 3 Bs that we have: be respectful, be safe, be responsible. And if we determine, yep, Heather, she's going to be on check in, check out, we communicate with the families, we talk with the student, see who they would like to be connected up with. It could be Mrs. Reichel, it could be Mrs. Kazard, it could be any teacher within the school, but it's really, it's a system that's used across the board with PBIS to really help connect an adult with a student. And they also do what's called a forced choice, where that survey then the students go through and they might say, okay, they give you kind of like a back and forth. So like, would you like a piece of candy or would you like your paper to have an A+ on it? And it keeps going back and forth around these different types of things like either peer attention or adult attention, like what helps us diagnose maybe what that student wants, like what's that missing piece. And so that then is taken into account with the check-in, check-out. It's not all about getting rewards. Most of our students really they either want a peer to like them, and then you start looking at the social aspect. Maybe they need an intervention with, how do I get along with other students? Like, what does that look like versus acting out in the classroom and you think that you're getting your peer attention, but really your peers are annoyed with you because they're not getting the learning they need. So besides check in, check out, we also have our counselors use what's called Healthy Ways. We just started using that this year. It's through one of the hospitals, and they actually dig into like what are some types of interventions, and you sit down one-to-one and work through some process with that. So sometimes we have that just for our students with IEPs. We're trying to get more interventions for all of our students to try to see what they need and how we can meet with that student and educate them, intervene. And it takes some time. It's not like a one and done. We typically do it during like lunch or recess, or if it's been, after school or whatever time. You could use WIN intervention. You could use academics for WIN time, or you could use a behavior intervention. You just have that conversation with the team that's working with the student. And we do have some students on behavior contracts, which is really, it's put in place for like students that maybe need really, this is very concrete. Like, you do this and you're gonna get a detention. You do that, and we've seen it work with one of our students currently, a 7th grader. There's a lot of work, a lot of communication with the families and the students, because you don't want any of these things to become a deterrent where I got you, or like the kid feels like, yeah, all this intervention stuff that you're doing is really setting me behind because I'm not really, I thought I was gonna make a connection, but in fact, I'm getting all this negative type of consequences coming along with it. So we take a look at that every 2 weeks and we say, okay, is the check-in, check-out working? Do we stay with where it's at? And then like you keep monitoring for 4 to 6 weeks. And some students, you can go to what's called a fade away. Like you don't just cut something completely, but you start fading away that check-in, check-out. Or you start increasing it and you turn it into the next level where maybe they don't need all 3 Bs. Maybe they just really need to stay on task in their classroom. And then you make that more of an individualized check-in, check-out. So we haven't by using our rules, we didn't know for sure if we were going to open up the floodgates and have tons of people accessing check-in, check-out. We have been very thoughtful on what that looks like. And like I said, even though if you get 3 referrals, it doesn't mean it's automatic. It's a conversation with the care team and the families and the student, and then you make a decision. And now we're talking about what's another area of Tier 2. It would be something like a Check and Connect or a mentor program. We have quite a few students from the high school come over to meet with multiple students in all of our grades, 4th through 7th grade. So that's a great access point. It's not always that easy to set up. It's a lot of legwork. Next year, what we want to do is actually have an internal mentor program as well. When we first started 4-7, we had we had 4K at the middle school. They would have reading buddies. And I think we did that too for a while, and all of a sudden, the whole COVID stuff, and it stopped a lot of that. So we want to bring back some internal mentorships, along with keeping that high school mentorship. So those are some pieces that we're going to try to extend as well. And what are some other things that we're working on that I might be missing?
For Tier 2, I think you said LPAs, maybe just a behavior plan.
And also probably small groups that are run, I don't know if that's in your universal, like from 7 Mindsets, or using different data points as far as running small groups of kids, not just one-on-one, but
yeah, we call them the SAG group, which is a weird acronym.
Yeah.
It's Social Academic Intervention Group, which is part of the process too. So like you might have a group of students that fall into, let's say, that attention seeking or a peer, and then you can have those groups so they can also not just do it by themselves, but then they can start modeling that with another adult with that behavior. So we do that as well. Our counselors run that right now, and then we do have life tools at the middle school, which maybe you can speak to a little bit more, because we have both Mrs. Reichel and Mrs. Durline are trained in it, so we offer that after school. I think the elementary does as well. But we also did one life tool, not legit, because it was during the day. We did one at the end during one of our 5th grade wins, because we had a large group of 5th grade students that needed some additional time beyond their after-school life tools. We kept it kind of going from the school year. So all those are really important. And there's parent buy-in and communication with all those. So a student at Tier 2, they still get that Tier 1 universal instruction. So they're getting our social, emotional learning. We're all doing morning meeting, 7 Mindsets at the middle school, and it's going over very well. So that's universal, but then they also will take some of that information for some of our students that need additional, like a double dose. Or we also are using our BEST survey results too. So like praise is something that everybody wants. You just might want it in a different way. So also talking with our teachers what that looks like too, because it's easy to get caught up in the moment, and yeah, you're going to have scolding take place, or you're going to have consequences, but then how are we also trying to have that positive feedback, especially for a student? What we've noticed with check-in, check-out, the students that we have right now, they're having that intentional positive check-in with probably 1 to 2 adults, and they feel more connected. And then we've been doing some minute meetings with a variety of our students at all levels too, just to kind of get clarity around what does it look like in your school? Do you feel safe? What are some concerns that you're having? So we're having just face-to-face conversations with many of our students to get feedback too, not just a survey, but just talking to them and saying, what else do you think we could be doing? What's going well? Things like that. And we're taking that back to our staff towards the end of the year here. We'll be gathering some more information about that.
I have a question. What do you mean by the life skills? So can you give me an example, like what that's covering?
Life tools?
Or life tools, sorry.
They work on specific behavior, socially emotional. If they went to a training, you could speak more to that.
So Life Tools was through, at one time it was through Security Health through Marshfield Clinic. Now it's just Marshfield Clinic. And they use Best Results. That's how they developed it through Marshfield Clinic. But we've been using it as another, basically tier 3, I would say. It's supposed to be intended like we're doing all this stuff during the school day, and here's another thing after school that you can it's tied to the best. So let's say it's using the same skill sets or externalizing behaviors or internalizing behaviors, and then they have a curriculum that they're using that are tied to specifically if I have a group of boys that need this, or a group of girls, or a group that, then they invite them, the parents, we have funds that pay for it, that pay the staff to be trained to do it. So it's just in addition to, and it's good because it's not separate from the data that we already collect through the BEST. It's just
And they don't miss
and
instruction.
yeah, they don't. And when she said they did it like outside of it, or like during the day, it was intended to be after school. It's intended to be in addition to, and then using their best results. Are they improving or are they not improving? And they have to keep that data, and Marshfield Clinic kind of collects that. We show that because that's how we get our funds to pay for it, is through them doing it with Fidelity. So
Okay.
we've been doing it 3 years now, I believe. So, one question, Teal, if you can get, I'm interested to know how many students. So like, not all of this, but like, for example, your Big Five, Disrespect, you had 72, 113, 154. About how many students were those referrals? So like, let's say the first quarter, it might have been 13 kids had this many referrals, and
Yep.
then it was 12. And I think that helps give some perspective of how many kids are doing the behavior. I think that would be helpful.
I think we showed that in that information with.
That's what I
We
thought you
did.
had.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, okay, it's
It's
on
in
the
there too.
original? Okay,
We wanted
okay.
to put together,
I
a
gotcha.
different look that had them all side by
Okay.
side and stuff.
I'll
We
go
can
back.
add some of that stuff to
Yeah.
it yet. We were just
No,
putting
you had
together,
it.
not
No.
just for
It
you
is
guys,
helpful
but for
to
our
have it
PBIS
like
team too.
look clean. It's
No,
just-
this looks good. I was just,
So, yeah, we'll add that
Yep.
into this so that it just continues to be consistent versus
Because
a
I noticed-
paragraph form. That's what we kind of thought would be
Yeah.
kind of hard to read that.
because that's
And
something
what
that's
we showed.
trackable, and I see that even in the high school data, and I see a spike in quarter 2, but you also know that, you're getting quarter 1, you don't know what's going on, getting used to stuff, then you might see a spike in quarter 2, and then as the year goes on, you want to see the trending down, and so
Yep.
you see that even in out-of-school suspensions in the high school, like
Yeah, we're
how
not
many
trending down
students.
too much right now.
No, but that's part of that is as you implement things, they tend to, anything you implement, you have a dip or
Well,
like-
the other
so-
thing to note too is the students, I think we're looking at a handful of students that have 2 or more
Right.
referrals in a term, and that's where that paragraph form of information, like we showed that percentage. Because it's really, it's a minimal amount, but the minimal amount
Yeah.
is affecting.
Yeah, you got to keep it in perspective, like how many kids,
Yeah.
and then being able to target different groups, like when Clint, we split out that attendance and non-attendance behaviors, because those are, you're dealing with attendance over here, and you might use interventions that have to do with just kids that are struggling with attendance, and you have kids that are just struggling with behavior, and then you have these kids that it's attendance and it's behavior, and you're going to do different things for them that might be more intensive, right? Like, so that's why it's important. Then you can drill down into the student level data, which is, that's
So
what
one
we
last
did.
thing I wanted to share, we talked about, we do currently have 2 students that are accessing a outside the classroom. Both those students we checked today, and they were failing pretty much every class, not turning in work and just running around in class. They're passing every one of their classes. So we want them to get their material from their teachers. Sometimes that classroom is just not the best access point. And again, that's for a few students. So we're trying, we're treading lightly, but at this point in time, if we haven't figured it out yet, we gotta do something.
So if a student is doing better in that situation, what happens when they transition to the high school? Are they going to start failing their classes again and have to wait till junior
Well,
year?
that's part of those conversations with Scott. Like, we have one 7th grader currently, so that's going to be a big conversation coming up about, like, what are we going to do with this particular student, because we are seeing success. How can we replicate that here? And I do believe we have those services. The biggest piece is us having those conversations to try to set the students up correctly.
Okay.
Okay?
We did check into Wisconsin Virtual School. Amy and I had a meeting with Jason, the executive director, and he works at CISA 9. And so we do know that it is possible for those. You really have two types of learners who might want to access that. One is the learner who's really wanting a virtual option because that's how he or she learns best. But you also have those who are trying to avoid brick and mortar, and they have the attendance issues, and then they'll say a lot of things if we just back off and let them be. And I don't know that that would be the best option, but is one of them the WVS student?
We're testing that, but a different
okay.
situation. So
Okay.
because we hadn't really accessed WVS, we are
Right.
with a student who moved back into the district. We are testing that out, but realize that's a bit different than RVA. I think there's going to be some benefits to having more control over it than an RVA, but it also costs per class. So, I mean, we have to look at it.
Yeah.
And it's not a school like RVA, it's a program that we access. So I think we're definitely trying to pilot some things to see how, but
Point being, they
Yeah.
may not have to,
Yeah.
if they're successful, they may be able to keep that option.
yeah.
Okay.
I think sensory has a lot to do with it sometimes for our
Yes.
students, like it's just way too much going on, so then they might act out. And then a program is a program, but you've got to have somebody, you have to have a really good
Absolutely.
adult that can help facilitate that. That's the key.
And as we
We
go
see
into,
that now
enter
with
these
our-
different things, RVA, we don't really have anybody, we kind of put it together. If we're gonna start using WVS, we are gonna need somebody that's their, because we have to keep track of these kids, because what happens is school choice is all well and good, but when you have somebody leave the district or go take WVS, and maybe it was for attendance, to avoid attendance, and then they come back, we are accountable to them. And they may have missed 6 months, a year and a half.
We have to be
And we
accountable.
have to be accountable to what that kid, now we're in front of them, or they're in front of us, and we have no say over what they just did or didn't do for a year and a half. And we see that a lot more nowadays, not just in Antigo, everywhere. So
You can't
we-
access WVS without a district employee
Yeah.
monitoring it, and that's our issue. We don't have anyone to do that.
So just keeping in mind as we explore lots of options.
I have one more question for you,
Yeah.
sorry. Part of the big 5 behaviors is bullying. Is that bullying that's occurring in school, on the bus, social media? Like, where do you see
Anything you see
the,
here includes bus, at school. If we do get social media information with bullying, we listen to it, then we contact the families right away. If it's happening at school or if it's affecting the school day, then we deal with it explicitly. Otherwise, we try to communicate with our families. You have every right to contact the police. And then we start talking about technology and students' use, and have you tried blocking? You're like, they really need to have this, so those are some of the conversations we have.
is that a big issue with the social media?
Well, I think it is. I think probably 3 years ago, it was at the top shelf because everything was happening and we allowed phones to be open in our school, at the middle school we did. But we've taken that away, phones are still there, kids are still using them,
Okay.
but it's gone down
Yeah, that's a low one.
big time because of that, having a no cell phone policy,
Okay,
so,
okay. All right, thank you.
yep.
Thank you.
All right. Guess where I'm going now. I can start with North data. So in quarter three, 90% of students at North have one or less office referrals. Top behaviors were defiance, disrespect, disruption, and physical aggression, which actually was an increase from quarter two. We had 95% that had one or less, and so now we had 90% with one or less. So we did have a few more students with behavior referrals in quarter three. 97% of students feel safe talking to grown-ups at school. We did have 1 in-school suspension and 5 out-of-school suspensions. We don't truly have an in-school suspension, so it was with me. But it was what was best for the student. And so that's what we made work. We also had 167 positive referrals. And something I didn't have noted in here, but I heard you asking the others, so I looked it up really quick. We did have 13 students with 3 or more behavior referrals, which is 6% of the population at North.
So at West, we had 96% of our student body with 1 or less office referrals, which also was trending down. We had 98% the first couple quarters. And as we dug into that data, it was very interesting to us. We had no in-school or out-of-school suspensions third quarter. So even though we had more students with office referrals, the kinds of office referrals have been changing. Less physical aggression, less targeted at one grade level, more balanced across the grades, and more even with boys and girls, which for the first time is something that stood out to us. Mostly it's boys, it's young boys. We have a lot of female teachers. Young boys are tend to be very boisterous, tend to be very active, and so it was interesting to see the trend to have more girls. A lot of that is due to, I'm going to say space. We don't have space for our students when they're struggling. There is not room in a classroom to go to take a break spot when you have 22 little bodies in our classrooms. When you have 2 and 3 students having a hard time, not only is there not room in the classroom to try to regulate them, there's not space to go somewhere else in our building. We have people working out of closets. We have multiple staff sharing spaces. So that has really led to it being difficult to really meet the needs of these kids that a couple of them are experiencing some pretty rough trauma that we're not able to combat right now. So just a couple of noticings from third quarter. Another interesting data point that we pulled was from our counselors did the minute meeting. So they meet with every student and ask them the same questions. They do that at all 3 of our buildings. And 99.4% of students at West feel safe there. 87.9% feel safe at home. So they feel safer at school right now than they do at home. And those of you who have had young children, you know they always act up with their mother, right? You know, you hear from your teachers that they're so good at school, you're like, oh, I can't be like that around me. Like, they're always giving me a hard time. And so typically young little children, as my counselor pointed out, will misbehave where they feel safest because they know that no matter what they do, they're still going to be loved, they're still going to be appreciated, they're still going to get that second chance again. And so our students are acting up more, perhaps maybe at school now, due to the safetiness that they feel. And then we had 169 positive referrals this quarter from our teachers.
Okay, for East Elementary, we had 95% of our students with one or less office referral during the third quarter. Interesting listening to Rachel's observations where it's more spread across the school, grade levels and genders. I know exactly where the issue is. It's at our first grade. We had a staff member go on maternity leave. It was a difficult transition for that class. We're working through it. So our top behaviors that we're dealing with are physical aggression, defiance, disrespect. We had 10 out-of-school suspensions third quarter, and involving 6 students. And I'm not concerned about that. We're working with the parents. Some of the parents have even come into the classroom for all or part of the school day to sit with their child. So we just don't have someone available. We don't have the staff available to provide a different setting or a different access point for education. I've had students sitting in my office for part of the day. It's either myself or a paraprofessional or the teacher problem solving. We don't have a counselor at East right now. It is scheduled for part of the day on Monday. Today she had to sub, so she wasn't there. I'm envious of the different programs and after-school activities. I've never heard of blank tools. And those types of things that could support or provide support after school for our students. We had on the minute meeting, 79.9% said they feel safe talking to somebody at school. 12% said maybe. I'm not sure what maybe means on that. So we are definitely seeing a spike in behaviors third quarter. I know where it's at. We're working with the parents on it, which is one of the best ways to approach that. We had our positives were 46 referrals in the third quarter. I received an email from Class Dojo, and last week we had 276 messages sent home from our parents, or from our staff, to parents. So with 95% positive feedback for that week. So, there's more than one way to communicate with parents on good things or concerns that the teachers have. So that's where we're at least.
With the uptick kind of in third quarter from middle school and elementary, is part of it possibly with like our social emotional learning, we're setting different expectations for our students and then having them need to meet those, so it's different referrals, or is it more just there's a lot of snow and they need to get outside and need to play? Like are we changing those expectations, being okay, so now we've been taught this is how we behave in the classroom, you've been here for 3 quarters and you're still not doing it? Is that playing a role in our increases possibly? No?
I can speak for us. I mean, it plays a role even within the same building.
Right.
Teacher to teacher. So that's something that, we're trying to work on. Like people, you can have a matrix, but you need to speak it and be consistent and have routines. I feel there is a social emotional learning loss for a lot of our students, like along with the academic. So a lot of times we see too, like it could be an academic deficit they're not getting the help they need. You got 20-some kids in the class, everybody's trying to do their best, and sometimes the behavior comes out, but when you analyze it, it might be because of the academic, and what can we do to help support the students? So like the 2 students we were talking about, that's not just seeking peer attention. There's some academic deficit there too. So it's a win-win now that we're seeing some growth and they're getting some additional support, not having to fight for that with 20-some other kids. I think all of us can speak to that. I mean, our kids really lack confidence, ability to concentrate, perseverance, and that's not any different from any school in the whole United States. It's tough. So yeah, I know for a fact we have inconsistencies in our expectations. It's nobody's fault. We're all a little different as adults too, like how we set things up in our classroom. We try to be consistent, but we could all be teaching English and we're all going to have a little way to teach it a little bit differently too. So you have to make that connection with the students, and the students have to trust you and believe in you.
I think what Kristen was asking, let me clarify, what I think she was saying is, as we get more consistent in our expectations, whether it's our social emotional learning, whether it's expectations that we have, do you see an uptick in a good, I took it as a good way.
Yes.
You're setting the bar a little higher, so you have higher expectations. I don't know that we can see the data yet in that, but that I think is what she was asking.
Right, like the referrals don't necessarily maybe have to be a bad thing, and not necessarily consistent amongst the grades, but within the classroom. It's exactly what Heidi was saying. It could be a positive thing that, okay, we've been teaching, we've been working on this, and now my expectations are a little bit higher, and so we have a little bit more referral.
Over time, I would hope
That
could happen.
Well, and across our behavior matrix, if you look at the elementary, the number of times a behavior is, I'm gonna say allowed, decreases, not only across the year, but up the grade levels, right? So like 5 to 7 times in kindergarten, because wow, we're still just figuring this out. But maybe it's 2 to 3 times a week that becomes a major behavior thing or something. So that does change slightly. I would say that's not the case here, but it could be with certain, maybe 1 or 2 students that, yep, now, hey, we're not going to allow that this many times without that behavior referral and a call home and maybe a different logical consequence for that behavior.
Anybody else have anything? Okay, thank you all, I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, 7 Mindsets license renewal.
I did want to share a little bit, we're still in the middle of gathering data. You have the quote, but for the school year, but I did want to share just an implementation survey that the middle school, you can just give that to those guys, that they gave in December just based on, because 7 Mindsets was just implemented at K7 this year was the first year we're implementing. It's been going on at the high school, this is their 3rd year. So this just gives a little bit of an overview of the teacher's perception of, are they doing it? Because part of it is not only student outcome data that we want to get over time, but implementing something with fidelity so that there are some common expectations and learning objectives. So this was positive data. These were all the all 20 teachers that teach core at the middle school took this. So it just gives some positive data that they want to keep using it, they are using it, and so then as we move forward, being able to then compare as we start collecting student level outcome data. It's really hard to say one thing is going to cause or not cause something. Okay, we have curriculum, or we have strategy, or we have a change in environment or classroom, right? So it's not one thing, it's a kind of a whole package looking at the data and how behavior over time and learning, social emotional learning can be impacted. So just wanted to share a little bit of that. We'll have a more comprehensive, either, I'm hoping in May, as far as where we're at with all the work that we've done. You heard a little bit about it here, the work that they're doing with CISA 9 and prepping for next year. Responsive classroom, which you approved last time, and then how far they got this year in building some of those systems, and then the goals for next year too, so. Anyway.
I think we have the same question. So this is not in color, so it's a little bit hard to
Yeah,
read.
I thought,
So is this,
I apologize.
it's okay. So is this that,
It's
the one that
good.
I'm comfortable using? They're all good.
Yeah.
Okay, it's either
I just
strongly
realized that,
agree
like,
or,
mine is in color, the other one that I.
so it's
Yeah.
strongly agree and neutral, right? They're not for this?
Yeah, none of them were disagree.
Okay, thank
There
you.
was not
That's-
one disagree on
Yeah, that's
any of
what
the
I'm
data,
saying.
so I apologize.
The
I
rest
will
of them you
share
can
it
pretty
again.
much tell, but that one's like, okay,
Yeah, none
thank
of
you.
them had, I looked through all of them, none of them had any, there was some neutral, but most of it was agree or strongly agree. And most of it was, are you doing it? Are you implementing it? Did you do it with, fidelity? And so this was part of what was asked for through 7 Mindsets. Ease of use, things like that. So, and luckily, all the schools right now are giving time in the day to be able, for teachers, it's not taking away from anything, it's enhancing, but they get the time, whether it's in wind time or whether it's advisory. Next year, high school will be looking at a different schedule so that kids can have more consistent access to that as well, to build more social emotional capacity. So I apologize for that.
It's okay, I just wanted to make sure.
That it was, I could resend too, so that you know that it was all. And so what I did with the quote, just so you know, we are now on one rotating, so in the past it was like elementary, middle school, and then the high school, because they were in a 3-year and they were getting a lot of bells and whistles with that. What we did with this quote is I just looked at any curriculum that might be math, science, whatever, to look at what would be a reasonable cost for a year. So this is $30,000 for the 4K-12. It actually has a few bells and whistles that, as far as full access, you can see it in the quote, full access to their website and different data pieces. But then also we do get supports from them as well, whether it's virtual, it won't be on site, that they can support the teams. But we feel like we have enough because of the high school, and then Jessica Colby has been somebody who's, from our counseling staff, who's put a lot of work into the first year of the implementation at the K-7 level, so.
So you're saying that the 30,000 would be a contract for 4K through 12 for 1 year?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I had that
Yep.
right.
Yeah. They were able to combine 2 of the elementaries, it was going to be more, but because of just size, we were able to basically get 2 licenses for the 3 schools.
I was wondering how that.
Okay.
So I know, so this topic in general is evolving and things that you have to cover change every year. I get that, but is it going to be somewhat of a repetitive curriculum so teachers aren't learning a new lesson plan every year? Or is it going to be, you know what I'm trying to say, kind of, so that there's going to be maybe less prep or less,
So
because it's going to be the same type of lesson?
Yeah, so it's all online, and one thing that what the teachers are, in getting the feedback from, like Miss Jolene Keppel, is they are really she's big into just the PBIS side of things, and what we really want to do is wrap the responsive classroom work that we're doing with the 7 Mindsets work moving ahead so that it's pretty seamless. The lessons are already developed, so it's basically like you're just moving. So this year's teachers, kindergarten, first, second, third, they have these lessons, they were already developed. So now, first grade, they know how the website works, they know how, like, it's year 2 is gonna be much easier, but remember, our teachers do these, our counselors are there to support.
Right.
And so that's the other piece of it that we are fortunate to have, is that the counselors they're the ones who collect the data. They're the ones that say, hey, how can I support you in this lesson? Do you need a booster? So it's not just the counselors coming in, teaching lessons and leaving, it's the teachers, because that's just the model that we feel works best. So it's only gonna get easier after, each year.
It's not like redoing a math curriculum every year.
No,
It's gonna
it's,
be-
the
I know
first
it's not
grade-
to
the
that
first grade is
extent,
the
but that's what I'm
curriculum. Yeah, the
making
first
sure.
grade curriculum is the first grade
Same.
curriculum. Yeah, I mean, they might be adding lessons as they learn,
Right, as
to the website.
things like that, yeah, that type of learning in general is
Absolutely.
going to, but, okay,
Yeah.
most part be the same, thank you.
It's a good question, though, because
Yeah.
we wouldn't want it to be
No.
taxing or stressful.
No, absolutely.
Okay, two things. So can you explain the difference between responsive classroom and 7 Mindsets and give me an example of how they differ?
So responsive classroom is a strategy of classroom management type of strategy, how you talk to kids, how you, you have experts in the room, because all three of the principals were trained in responsive classroom last summer, so they want to speak to responsive classroom, but that's more of a, how we set up our classrooms, how we talk to our students, how we consistently, using asset space versus whatever. The SEL curriculum, like 7 Mindsets, is the what. It's where we believe that if we teach empathy, that it's a skill that you're gonna learn, right? So it's like teaching math skills, it's teaching skills, so it's a curriculum that you're using. Responsive classroom is more of how you're going to approach all your day, how you're gonna talk to kids in math class and science class if something comes up. So 7 Mindsets is curriculum.
Can you give me an example? Like a specific example, like?
Of a topic?
Yeah,
Like-
maybe I could ask
Yeah, I
one of the
mean, you can
principals.
give like a topic that they might teach,
Yes.
like,
It's like goal setting.
yeah.
So one of the 7 Mindset lessons is on goal setting. Also talking about like sharing your beliefs. So like meaning like what do they believe that they can achieve? And really focusing on at the beginning of the year is a lot of goal setting, is a lot of coming up with their community agreements within their classroom. So that would be some of their lessons. There's a lot. I know that we also share through social media. Courtney Yari is one of the one of the staff members that do share for the district regarding the 7 Mindsets, and she does put things on social media regarding the upcoming month. So like we have a different focus each month for 7 Mindsets as well, and so that's, I mean, I can pull it up right in just a second, and I can share with you kind of like how we did for PBIS, where we'd have a focus where beyond like respecting each other, or there's a focus for the month for 7 Mindsets as well.
Well, and I'd have to go back, I don't know when we shared it, was it November? We shared the whole, like, we can re-pull up, I can reshare that. It gave all of the examples of the 7 Mindsets and some examples of lessons, and we have that actually on our website, I think. How about give her an example of responsive classroom and how that would be?
That is really your classroom management.
Yeah.
That's about, it always starts with a morning meeting and the closing circle. You have quiet time in the middle of your day. It's kind of like a reset. There is energizers throughout the day to get kids up and moving. There's a way to interactive model. So anything that you're teaching kids how to do, the interactive modeling is a way that you can do it. Practicing lining up, going to get a pencil, right? How we look at each other in morning meeting, and then just the language that you use with kids, the reinforcing language, the reminding language, and the, what's the other R? Reinforcing, reminding? Redirecting. So it's all, I mean, Heidi explained it well, like the 7 Mindsets is like the curriculum of how we teach, just like a math skill and a social emotional skill, but responsive classroom is like how we're going to do that through our day. How is our school going to feel? How are adults going to interact with children? How are children going to interact with each other in our school?
Teaching you how to behave versus managing
Predictability.
behaviors.
What's that?
It's really, and I'm not trying to, but teaching you how to behave versus managing behaviors is like, trying to like.
You have to do both. and
But right, but one is
absolutely.
teaching how to behave and the
Yeah.
other is managing the
And
behaviors.
giving kids predictability. There's a
Routine.
Yeah,
Right.
consistency that's a tough word because we all try to be consistent, but predictability, like if a kid does this, it's pretty predictable in a responsive classroom that this is how a teacher would respond, or another student should respond, and if they don't, like, you have predictable types of things that you can expect, especially developmentally with kids. It's different at kindergarten, 4K, like we said, than it is 7th grade or 8th grade, 10th grade, but they're still developing. So that's part of responsive to what's happening in front of you and creating predictability, so.
Thank you, because.
I was able to bring up the topics for 7 Mindsets, if you're interested. So like September, we focused on self-awareness. October, self-management and social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, resilience, growth mindset was in March, empathy is in April, hope is in May, as well as in June.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to make sure it was different because I was trying to remember, what Ms. Willie said when we talked about the responsive classrooms at the board meeting, and I wanted to make sure that they were different, that we're not paying another $30,000 to do the same thing as what the other program was doing. So, yeah. So thank you for clarifying.
It's a good question.
So.
Something that we're trying to make sure that they're blending well together.
Right.
Our PBIS.
And one of the things that we're working on is through the teams so they're doing some cross-level teams now in behavior, really looking at tier 1 to tier 2, tier 2 to tier 3 with Lynn Walters, who is the behavior strategist, but also our CISA 9 supports that we have that are working on some of that. And part of it is to create, the visual is the end, but something that anybody could look at and be able to know, here's our framework, PBIS, whatever that might be, and then here's how responsive classroom, here's how restorative practices, and then how our curriculum fits in at all these tiers, so that the teachers understand, the kids understand, there's something that it's aligned and visual, so that we all know how these things kind of fit together, internally and externally, but we're kind of in the middle of working on the work in order to create and then honestly, the school-based mental health grant, the way that we're approaching it this time, a couple of years ago, it was COVID, we're trying to there's $150,000, we know we want this, we know we have this data. Now we have a much better idea of where we're at, and we can really hone in and focus on what it is that we don't have that might help us above and beyond what we already have, to be a little bit more specific and strategic about it, so.
And where does that grant come from?
DPI, it's a state level school-based mental health grant. That's the one that's just ending, we've been in it for 2 years.
Is that through the trauma-based school program?
It's just school-based, it's school-based mental health. I mean, you'd have to, that's a different piece of it. I don't think that I'm not sure how they're doing trauma-informed care. A lot of, honestly, all the work that we do in schools now, a lot of it is just built in. Trauma-informed practices are built into whatever you are doing. You're trying to.
It's like morning meeting,
It's
giving
not separate.
students that soft start.
Yeah.
Instead, if they're really worked up about something from home or the bus, come in and sit down and start math. It's, equipping them to start their day intentionally.
Right. And I understand that side, but then the only concern I have is that we're, as we teach our students that just the soft start to the day, right? Then we have employers saying, we have kids that are coming out of school that don't show up for work, or they're showing up late. And, so how is that transitioning them to real life where you have to be on time? We expect our teachers to be on time. All that kind of stuff, you don't get a soft start to your day when you're an adult. So like, how are we transitioning the kids from that to reality, I guess,
Like I said earlier, a kindergartner wouldn't be expected to do the same thing as an adult. It's developmental, right? So I think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding about trauma-informed care or practices, that it's something that is to not have high expectations. And actually, part of trauma-informed care is having high expectations, even when you have these things that may have happened to you or not, right? What we know about ACE scores, the higher the ACE score, the more unfortunately, the lower health outcomes, the lower job outcomes, all of that. So I think, and that came from a huge, study from a medical, right? Like outcomes when you have these traumatic events that might happen. So it, to me, and what you see here is, it's not an excuse, it's an understanding of it so that you can address it in a way that still has high expectations for whoever that might be, at whatever level they are developmentally, so that they can reach their potential and can be on time and can be. And so I think it's really, that's how I look at it. I didn't have a lot of trauma in my life. I see kids who do have trauma, and I see them actually being a lot more resilient than maybe other kids were. So I think building upon the assets that kids have and with them and developmentally, right? Like, how do you do that so that you can be equipped to go on a job?
And they learn the tools developmentally, so they know what perseverance is and what they need to do then to persevere. Because there are consequences for not attending or being late, let's say to high school classes. So, just learning what they need and how to get it, because you're right, employers will expect to be there.
Well, nowadays they can't find anybody, so.
Well, hopefully that'll change.
I scheduled 15 minutes earlier and then they have to be there.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, I think that's right. I think a lot of people do a soft start to their job. They show up 15 minutes early, they talk to their coworkers, or they drink that cup of coffee or whatever, and they have learned to do their own soft start. It's not mandatory soft start.
And what we're seeing.
What they need.
What they need is what they need.
And people have different, you can look at brain research and trauma, and we're talking about, there's like levels of trauma. We're talking about kids who have significant trauma and that has changed their brain chemistry. And so it might look at like attention deficit, really they're in fight or flight because that's all they had to do was fight or flight, right? And I've seen that. We have families in our own district that we have one that's moving out again who has been in and out 4 times this year to different school districts, and kids who they're coming back and then they leave again and they come and that has impact. And so how do we help kids who might not have the same resources that I had be able to, and we can't be all things to all kids, but our role is to try to mitigate what their experiences are the best that we can when they come here, so that we can say, you can be on time to a job, you can, even though you've had these experiences that have rocked your world at age 4 and 5. I mean, we have some pretty bad stuff, right? Like, there's levels, I get it, but, and meeting kids where they're at and trying to get them to realize they can be what they, in spite of, So that's, I know that there's lots of different, but that's how I look at being trauma, understanding trauma. It's not an excuse. It's a lot of times I see, like I said before, some of the kids who have experienced the most trauma are actually some of our most resilient kids. And how do we use that asset in a positive way, right? Instead of them coming and then thinking that everybody, Rachel's right, like, you see it in your own home, and I say the same thing about my kid. Why can't you act the way you act at school at home, right? Like, and we have different ways of it's true. What she's saying is true. Some of these kids, when they come to school, that they act out because they, right, wrong, or otherwise. So do not think for 1 second that our goal is not to try to make kids be successful beyond high school, whatever that might look like for them.
Okay.
Can I add one comment? When I hear the phrase soft start, honestly, at first I thought that's what morning meeting would be, is a soft start, but really there's so much more to it. It's there's different parts of a morning meeting: greeting, morning message, you know, I mean, they're sharing, and so there is strategic parts of a morning meeting, and that's really what one of our continuous improvement plan goals is that sense of belonging, and that's what that morning does. That provides that, you know, they're greeting each other, they're going around the circle, whether it's, I was in kindergarten subbing last week, you know, and we're elbowing, and they know that they're supposed to greet by first and last name, you know, in kindergarten, and they're knowing the students, and they're like, good morning, Mrs. Smith, good morning, so-and-so, Johnson, whatever, you know, and so they're doing that, they're sharing about their day, and same with closing circle. Yes, it's part of a soft start, but it doesn't mean that there's any lower expectations.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll move that forward to the agenda, please. Thanks.
And the cost at this point will be grant funded. I don't know if I put that in there. But I'm not sure which grant yet.
All right.
The full cost will be covered by a grant?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to the social media litigation.
So I
I thought you were going to.
I put this on here. It is, thank you, a repeat. I shouldn't say that. It's similar to what the board approved with the Jewel litigation. Same law firm, same national class action suit, and the expectation is the same. I attached for you the Surgeon General, you know, why they're doing this. It's lengthy, but basically, minimal work on our end, but if they are awarded this, if they win, basically then we would have money based on our population, et cetera, to combat the negative effects, the bullying that happens on social media, or the, you know, arranging for a fight, or the inappropriate videos, whatever it is. If they win, then we would be considered a claimant in that. So I thought it was worth it based on the outcome of the Jewel lawsuit.
Are they going after all of the social media, so like Snapchat, Twitch,
They
all
listed
that?
them. I had that same question, so.
I see Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and this is other social media platforms.
So those three, and then I think as they get in, they would determine who else is included.
Okay.
But those are the big.
Because the demographics for Facebook are not.
They're my age.
They might
Yeah,
be.
yeah, they're 35, you know, 30 to 40, yeah.
It's
and up.
Instagram and Snapchat and whatever new one, TikTok, all of that stuff
Yeah.
that kids are doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Twitch.
The TikTok challenges alone and the damage they've caused in this building, I think, would make it worth it. So, it's
I
just
don't
my
know how they're
opinion.
gonna win. I just don't understand.
I didn't think that with the Jewel either, and they did.
It's true.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, why not, right?
Right?
There's
no.
my
I mean, we're not gonna go, I think I told you, I don't know if Julie said, we're not gonna do the AODA grant this year because we're gonna use the Jewel money. We don't need to manage, because it's for the same purpose. That's exactly what it's for, is to combat what we're talking about. So,
So you don't want more money?
Yeah.
the issue, well, part of it, it's not even that.
Tell me more about this.
Well, so part of it is the
Exciting.
management of the grants. The school-based mental health grant is worth $150,000, so minus, not even thinking about the Jewel money. The AODA grant is $15,000 a year, and the management of it, we can build in the AODA stuff within the school-based mental health grant and manage one grant. That's
Gotcha.
why.
So-
That was just a bonus, like, oh, now we have this Jewel money. Because we don't have, it's a lot of management.
The manpower.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Okay,
so we
that
can,
makes
we
more
can,
sense.
yeah, that's
I
really
just
the
thought
reason.
maybe
It
you
was
just
more
had
just-
this pile somewhere in
No,
there.
no, we don't, but we feel we can do the same with managing one grant.
Fair enough. All right. Anybody else?
So if it's okay with you, we'd like
Yes, we will
board
move
to vote
that
on it.
forward
Okay.
to the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next meeting will be May 8th. We can adjourn.